Now, what China has done is noted that while they are being accused of subsidy and dumping with their vehicles, and so it's a trade remedies case that escalated into a WTO dispute. They've had relative success in the low end of the electric vehicle market in Europe. China is, of course, pleading they want to help the world with manage climate change, and excluding their vehicles from Europe is unfair and against the rules. So that remains for another day. But for me, what the backstory is here, and the story that we ought to watch, is that you have a situation where electric vehicles are very interesting. They're an alternative to internal combustion engine vehicles, and they have strengths and weaknesses versus other kinds of vehicles. What we have is a situation where governments have decided electric vehicles are really good and we want them. And by the government saying that we think these vehicles are really good and we want them, there are subsidies everywhere. And so while this is at one level, the Europeans are accusing the Chinese of subsidy and dumping. Frankly, as I see it, electric vehicles are subsidies all the way down. All right. Everybody, they have a presence in the marketplace as fast as they have because production is being subsidized, at least in the United States. Consumption is being subsidized. And much like China, the U.S. has mandates with how much of the fleet. We cloak it in corporate average fuel economy regulation. China just did their command economy thing and said, thou shalt buy an electric vehicle. Whatever it is, this is an industry that is subject to government distortion on all sides. And to the extent that consumers are somewhat left out of the conversation. And I think the consumers ought to be heard from at some point because there are real trade-offs. As I said, EVs are interesting in certain applications. They have strengths and weaknesses. People are finding out that they're more expensive to insure. They depreciate faster. There's some downsides that weren't there initially. We'll see how that shakes out. There are definitely some upsides in terms of quiet operation and somewhat simplicity of the vehicle, but it all has to be sorted out. And by excluding Chinese vehicles from the European markets, Europe is doing what the United States did previously, which is ensure that electric vehicles of a certain service size and capacity and specification is more expensive than its internal combustion engine alternative. China has dealt with this problem according to the IEA, where they have roughly equivalent costs for equivalent performance/service and capacity of internal combustion vehicles versus battery vehicles, which says to me there's a lot more innovation going on in the market in China than we see in the US or in Europe. We're essentially making sure there are no low-end vehicles available to consumers. I don't know if that's fair to EVs. I don't know what happens at the end of it all. As a general matter, we've got that difficulty where the governments have decided on a policy and everybody's subsidizing. So while the Chinese are being accused of subsidy, no one's hands are clean. Separately, you have global companies involved in this for the most part. It's a sensitive issue because the European manufacturers, particularly the Germans, are heavily invested in China. Volkswagen has massive facilities there, as do the other German companies. They have big sales operations. There is an inherent conflict when global companies are forced into national policies. So it makes life complicated, but it particularly strains the system in this case. So we'll have to watch this. I just think it's going to happen a lot.